This is your basic cleaning, disassembly, and maintenance on your Taurus 1911 pistol. Obviously, the first thing that we want to do with this gun is we want to make sure that it's cleared out. So we're going to lock the slide to the rear. We're going to visually inspect the chamber and the magazine well to make sure there's no rounds or ammunition present in here. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to let the slide go forward, and then we're going to bring our bushing wrench into play. This bushing wrench is included with the gun. However, if you have an aftermarket one, there's lots of options available out there. And the reason that we need that is this plug right here has spring tension on it. We need to be able to depress that and then rotate the actual barrel bushing out of the way to be able to fully disassemble this gun. So I'm going to go ahead and start here with the bushing wrench on top of it. We're going to press down and I'm going to rotate towards me as I do this, keeping my hand over the top of this so I don't launch my spring into the ceiling. Once we do that, we can take this out. We can take the plug and the entire recoil spring assembly out of here. We can rotate the barrel bushing in the opposite direction and work that off the gun. We'll set that aside. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to remove the slide stop from the frame. And to do that, we need to bring this back until the notch in the slide is flush with the top of the slide stop. And then pushing from the opposite side of the gun, we're going to press that through and then wiggle the slide stop out. Lastly, we're going to push the slide forward and remove the entire slide and barrel assembly from the frame. We're going to take the frame, we're going to set that aside, and then we're going to continue to disassemble this pistol by removing the full-length guide rod and then slowly working the barrel out by pulling it out of the lugs and forward through the front of the barrel. Now that your 1911's been fully disassembled, we can move into the cleaning and inspection process. So obviously, just like any other semi-automatic centerfire pistol, we're going to make sure that we get that slide nice and clean. We're going to want to make sure we take care of the frame as well. And we're going to want to make sure we get the barrel clean. So we can start with our solvent, and we can apply a decent amount of this to the slide. A couple of squirts there. Decent amount to the barrel as well. And then just a little bit to the interior of the frame. We're going to take our nylon brush, and we're just going to make sure that we get a good brush on all those areas to get any sort of built-up gunk and carbon out of this frame. Same thing on the slide. And of course on the barrel as well. We want to make sure, especially on the barrel, to pay attention to the lugs on the top of the barrel where the slide and the barrel actually lock up together. So I like to brush back and forth to make sure we remove anything from that. And then of course, lastly, with the barrel, we're going to want to make sure that we clean the interior of the barrel. To do that, we're going to use our bore snake by dropping the bore snake through it and pulling away from us so that you're not pulling any debris back towards into the gun, but rather everything's going out of the gun. Once your solvent's been applied, once everything's been scrubbed down, I recommend you give it a wipe down to remove any excess solvent that you may have left on the gun. And then we're going to go through the process of lubrication. Lubrication is critical on 1911 pattern pistols as they have a tremendous number of metal-on-metal contact points, which is what we're going to look for as we're applying lubrication. Specifically with the 1911, we actually like to use a light grease versus a thin oil. I can take my applicator and we can just squeeze a little bit in one side, and then we're going to squeeze just a little bit in the other side of the gun as well. The next area that I want to apply grease to is the barrel hood that we've been talking about. These lugs are going to come into a ton of metal-on-metal contact with the slide during your recoil cycle, so we want to make just a little bit of grease in there as well. Now that we've greased up the slide rails and the lugs, we can look at a couple of places where we can apply a light coat of oil to those. Different ways to do that: you can just take your oil, you can squirt a little bit of it in here on these rails, a little bit on the inside here, and then just use your finger to make sure that's evenly applied throughout there. The last part of this that we're going to lubricate is going to actually be your barrel bushing right here. If you look at your barrel bushing, there are going to be wear marks on there. If there's wear, you want to apply a little bit of oil to the bushing, and then you want to use your finger to spread that around to make sure it's nice and lubricated. If you end up with a little bit of excess like I did, you can just take your shop rag and wipe that excess off to make sure the part is appropriately but not over lubricated. Now that we've applied a nice coat of lubrication to our 1911, it's time to put this gun back together. First thing we're going to do is we're going to start by taking our barrel and sliding it back through the front of the slide. Once that's into place, you should be able to feel it lock into the lugs so that it doesn't move forwards and back. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to move our full-length guide rod back into the gun. And this is going to go in through the back and then drop down so that it interfaces nicely with the barrel. We now set that aside because now we have to bring the slide and frame back together. Now you do need to watch the barrel link and make sure that it's in the right position, because that's going to be the hardest part of getting these two parts together. If it's out of position, this isn't going to go well. There we go. That is nicely lined up. Once your link is lined up and you can clearly see through the frame, you're going to go ahead and take your slide stop and you're going to partially insert that so that it goes through the link and holds everything in place. Then you're going to retract the slide back to the position that it was in when you initially removed the slide stop, and you're going to press in on the slide stop and up. Once you have your slide stop partially inserted back in the pistol, you're going to want to press down and up to get it past the detent pin. Now this is a fairly new gun, so our detent spring has a lot of spring tension in it, which means I'm going to get a little help from this Q-tip to help clear that detent pin so we can get back in. That does shoot in after time, so it won't be as much of an issue the longer you shoot the gun. Once your detent pin is back in, you can complete the process of reassembling this by starting to add your barrel bushing and your recoil spring and guide rod plug back to the gun. So we're going to take our slide and we're going to push it forward. We're going to make sure that that guide rod is fully seated, and then we're going to add our barrel bushing. The barrel bushing needs to be added with it pointed if you're looking down the barrel of the gun, pointed to the right if you're looking down the barrel of the gun, and then rotated all the way relative to the left of the gun before we can add our recoil spring and guide rod plug. Once we get the recoil spring over the guide rod itself, we're going to reorient the pistol up, and we're going to bring our barrel bushing wrench back into play for this one here in a couple of seconds. First things first is we need to press all the way down on the guide rod plug and partially rotate the barrel bushing to retain that guide rod plug before we get our bushing wrench back out, press down, and rotate it until it clicks the barrel bushing into place. Now that your 1911 has been fully cleaned, disassembled, and reassembled, we can wipe any excess lubricant off the exterior of the pistol and then perform a very brief function check. With the 1911, your function check is going to be, you're going to rack to the rear, make sure that it's empty. You're going to engage that manual safety, depress the grip safety and attempt to pull the trigger. The gun shouldn't go off, and then you'll disengage the manual safety, release the grip safety, and press that trigger again. Once again, the gun should not go off. Lastly, you will disengage all safeties, press the trigger, pin it to the rear, cycle the pistol, release to check for that reset, and then press that trigger one more time. That completes the function check on your 1911 pistol, and now it's good to go.